9/11 happened. I was in the city, and we were in the Midtown office, and I just was like, I'm not. And all those things run through your head, right? Like, what the hell's going on? I don't want to die making 500 cold calls to people a day. This is not what I'm passionate about. And
Welcome to Connecting the Dots. I'm your host, Jessica Caresse, and this space is a place where you talk about seemingly random topics, but in all actuality, they're connected together. And today we have a very special guest. His name's Kyle. He is a restaurant veteran. He had 15 years in the restaurant industry running, the day-to-day operations. And now he focuses on the strategic growth and nurturing of emerging restaurants. So Kyle, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
yeah, thanks for having me, Jessica. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So tell us what about your current day to day. What does that look like, and how does that align with your definition of success or your current goals?
Man, these are real questions you got going on here. It's interesting. I just started a new job. It's basically the same what I do now, but what's really been life changing for me is the fact that we have a baby. So that's always been a goal of mine. I we have a My wife has a 17-year-old daughter from another marriage. I call her my daughter, but I've never had a baby of my own. So that's sort of a little bit of wrench in my normal everyday routine. But typically I'm out there. I work from home, work remote. We do a lot of national work. And we're finding sites for restaurants that are looking to expand their brand across the country. So we work with a network of hospitality focused commercial real estate advisors, and we're constantly looking for, if you could find Sweet Green or Chipotle when they were just one or two units. So we want to be able to bring this very strategic, very well thought out, data backed location analytics approach to their real estate site selection. So the restaurant business is hard enough as it is. So we like to find these smaller groups that have, ton of upside growth potential, and sort of level the playing field with the bigger guys, and see if we can position themselves alongside of them at least, or maybe even outposition them in some cases, in order to just kind of help speed up their growth process.
Hmm. Okay. So do you work with like only major restaurant groups, or do you work with all sizes or particular niche or?
Yeah, so we work mainly with probably groups you haven't heard of. Um, Sometimes on the independent side, a lot of times on the franchise side. But because we're looking for those 3 to 5 unit, 3 to 10 unit operators, they're really sort of like, the minor leagues, up and coming sort of brands that, because what happens in the restaurant business, you have one location. And even if you have two other partners, once you get to 3 units, we have one partner looking at one looking at the other, and the other one looking at the third. Well, now what happens at the fourth through 10th? How do you scale that business from that? And when we're looking at those brands, everybody's kind of maxed out where they are. Everybody involved, the accountant, the general managers, maybe the director of operations. So we like to come in and provide the real estate services and help take that off their plate so they can focus on what they need to focus on, which may be more operation focused, fundraising, things like that.
Hmm. That's very interesting. That's very, very
Yeah.
interesting. And it's so funny. So I have no experience in the restaurant industry. I just like to go out to eat.
None. You've never worked in a restaurant?
No, I've never worked in a
How'd you
restaurant.
escape that?
I think it was actually pretty intentional because I was scared of it. Like, because
Oh,
I know how hard my sister, she worked at Olive
she scared
Garden.
you. Oh, yeah. That will
Yes.
scare you. Yeah, for sure.
Yes. She worked at Olive Garden and she worked at Pizza Hut. So, and I
Oh,
just hear
God.
the stories. I'm like,
Yeah, I can imagine those stories were pretty horrific. Yeah, that's probably a great a great place to go if you're trying to avoid the restaurant. Tell me everything horrible, because yeah, those places probably did it to you. No offense to them, but I would imagine that was the case.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's interesting because I always just assumed that, these restaurant groups, they just did all of this on their own. So, I mean, this is the learning for me
Mm.
that I didn't even know these type of services were provided. And
Yeah,
mhm.
it's sorry not to cut you off, but it's not always provided. For the bigger groups, obviously the Chipotle's of the world have somebody in house who handles that stuff. But we've found that little pocket where, you know, again, if you're one of the partners and you're also looking at real estate, Now you've got 3 restaurants, you've got, probably 100 or so staff, you're doing a couple $1 million in sales. To go out and look for space and really do the homework, it takes to find the right site, because it's not just calling a sign, right? There's a sign on a property, sure, but there are other opportunities that are available, and you want to deal with somebody who specializes in that space. So certainly there are folks that do it on their own, but we found that opportunity to be, that sort of 3 to 10 unit operator where they really need that help if their plan is to scale the concept.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. That's really good. And I love how you highlighted that specific detail because, I'm in the early stages of trying to scale my business.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the learning curves I had transitioning away from corporate to starting and, trying to scale is really refining that niche market.
Mm, yeah.
Like I didn't realize how important, like everyone says it, but it's like I didn't realize how important and how nailed down and how focused that you need to be. So it was really great hearing you, identify that.
And I'll tell you what, like when you're in that growth phase and you're just starting out, and I can relate to that on the real estate on the broker side and on the restaurant side, is you're like, I can do that. I can also do that, because you want to make money, right? You're in startup phase. You need to make capital. You need to make money, raise capital. But if you stay focused, and it's so hard to stay focused because you're like, oh, this guy wants to work with me. He's willing to pay me the monthly retainer or whatever it is. But in my experience, and people told me this, it's a waste of time, right? That's not what you do. Why are you going to do that? Because you can take that energy and focus it on finding new prospects who are what you do and that you really excel at. But in that beginning phase, you're jumping at everything because you're trying to kind of make it work for yourself. But yeah, I would agree. That's a great piece of advice, to stay focused on what you do there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now talking about staying focused,
Mm.
is the restaurant industry, is that something that you always wanted to do and always wanted to be in?
Oh God, no, 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 no. I was I worked in restaurants in high school, and in college I would come home, and I liked it, because there's that kind of social aspect.
Mm.
They give you a drink after work, everybody's friends, some friend of a friend got you a job. You're not sitting in a cubicle, right? You're kind of actually engaging with people. So there's that social kind of vibe to it. But no, I was working on Wall Street. Working in financial services. And then 9/11 happened. I was in the city, and we were in the Midtown office. And I just was like, I'm not, all those things run through your head, right? Like, what the hell's going on? I don't want to die making 500 cold calls to people a day. This is not what I'm passionate about. And I just, maybe like 2 or 3 months later, I just was like, I'm gonna go to culinary school and try this chef thing. It was kind of like right at the time when Anthony Bourdain and all these like Food Network stars were coming out. So it was like kind
Ah,
of cool to be a chef. I'm like, okay, so now it's kind of cool, because prior to that, it was like, well, you worked in a restaurant because you couldn't get a job.
yeah.
Like, I can't get a job, so I'm gonna be a waitress, or I'm gonna go be usually it's like a front of the house position. But yeah, I wanted to be a chef, and I did it for a long time.
Wow. So you
Yeah,
were on Wall Street and said,
awful.
nope,
Yeah, no, thank you.
going to
No, that's
culinary school.
yeah,
Like
and
that
plus it
makes
was awful timing, because it was like right when everything was super hot, and then everything was going down because no one knew what was going to happen in the world, right? So it was scary. It certainly didn't look like there was a future there. So, but
mm,
yeah, no, I completely, I guess, sort of stumbled into it for a long time, but I loved every second of it for sure.
yeah. So your love for it just basically started slowly but surely as you were growing up and just working in the restaurant industry and just forming those happy memories.
Yeah, to me, I think it was like I played sports all through college, and being in the kitchen had a very like almost athletic feel to it. There was a prep, like a warm up time. There was the start when everything got busy. It got super hectic, and then at the end of the night or the middle, there was like a little lull, and you had like your little halftime, and then you had another little push, and then it was over. So it was like, we're closed. That's it. Game over. And I loved it. I love that rush. I love just the fact that I wasn't taking the subway to Midtown every day. I had this very, I got to travel. I got this very hands-on experience early on as a chef. So yeah, it was just a different career path that I'm very grateful for. And yeah, I loved every second of it until I didn't. Yeah.
So how did you even end up pursuing finance then?
Oh man. Um, I was working for Olivia Mather, which is a big time. They're still a big time ad agency, but they weren't paying anybody anything. I didn't really see like a path to making a ton of money unless you're on the creative side. And which I was definitely wrong about. I could have stayed there, but um, at the time, this was, I guess, 2001, 2002, 2001, 2000, 2001. The stock market was going crazy and everybody's making all this money. And I was like, all right, forget this. Let me go over there because I saw all these kids who were, quite frankly, not the brightest kids in the world making a lot of money. And I'm schlepping it every day for like $400 a week to
Oh
like
wow.
do, yeah. And it wasn't happening. So I was, asked a buddy of mine, I said, do you know anybody who works on Wall Street? He's like, yeah, I'll get you a job. And that's how I wound up over there. But was not meant for me. Wasn't meant for me.
Okay, so now we have to
Yeah.
back up even further. So then you were pursuing the ad agencies or advertising?
Yeah. I was working, I graduated school. My whole thing actually was crazy. It was marketing, advertising. Um, and I did my final paper on like the fact that there were going to be ads on the internet one day. Like it
Wow.
would be very prevalent. And
Yeah.
I wish I had, it was on some old Mac that I had, but I wonder what I wrote. Because I remember at the time it was all like banners, like banner ads. And
Mm.
I'm curious what I wrote. But yeah, so I thought I was gonna pursue some sort of career in marketing or advertising.
Mm-hmm.
I made the mistake of chasing the money, and that's definitely been a lesson.
Okay. So then what it's like you went from marketing, advertising, the Wall Street to culinary school.
Crazy, right? So now when you
Yeah.
say it out loud, you're like, wow, lost, man. I didn't know. You know what I mean? Like my parents were educators, and I probably would have considered something else right out of high school. I wasn't big on education because it was just like slammed down my throat every day. They were educators. They loved being educators. My dad just retired from higher education like 3 years ago.
Oh wow.
Um, I'm surprised he never pushed me to be a teacher. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, but I just didn't know. I just always felt like there was something else. I had like always had like this entrepreneurial feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when restaurants came, I didn't always want to be a chef, but I thought if I was going to run restaurants or own restaurants and the chef left or I couldn't find a good chef and I didn't know anything how to cook, I was screwed. Like it just made sense to me. So that was my thought process there. But yeah, the jumping around, I did in a very short period of time. So it's not like I had these long careers going, but
Yeah.
it was, yeah, I guess just searching for something that felt right. And the restaurants wound up feeling right for me.
Mm-hmm. So when you were a kid, and I know your parents probably were always stressing, get good grades in school.
Mm,
Like, did you have constant career conversations with your parents, or did you think about your career, or were you just
that's a good
enjoying your
question.
childhood type of thing?
I was very into sports. So that was a big thing. Like I remember pushing. I wasn't going to be a professional athlete. I knew that, but I knew that if I played at a certain level, it helped me get into a better school. And it did.
Mm-hmm.
But that was really what I remember. They were just kind of like, my parents were big on like, look, just put yourself in a position where you can make the best decision. Like, don't have it be that you're stuck with what's left because you didn't put yourself in the right position. So, like, kind of keeping yourself in the driver's seat so that you can make these decisions. Because sometimes people make decisions because they have to, right? Like, I
Right.
have to go to this school because I didn't study, or I have to, I can't play baseball on this team because I never practice as hard. I'm not as good. But if you did everything and you kind of, just did your best and dedicated your time where you thought you were, best served to do it, then you're going to put yourself in a position to succeed. So they had me, God, man, they had me like playing musical instruments. They had me, sports, making sure I was studying, karate, just staying busy. And I think that was part of like maybe why I wound up checking out so many different things because you always wanted to find out what made you feel fulfilled. And like I said, it was the restaurants for a long time.
Mm-hmm. So when you started working, was it out of just because you wanted to work, or was it because you needed to work?
After college,
You started in a restaurant. You started working
yeah.
in restaurants in high school, college, right?
Yeah. So when I started working, it was that thing where like, your parents give you a little bit of money, but then you get to like ninth, 10th grade, like, all right, you got to start doing something, take the
Mhm.
garbage out, gonna give you some allowance or And then I think it was 10th or 11th grade. I had to be 10th, the summer of 10th grade. I remember two of my friends they were like two of my best friends now, but at the time knew them kind of just as a group of friends. And they had money. Like they had like $80 one day. I remember being like, holy crap, man, where do you guys get this money? Like, oh, we work at this restaurant. And I was like,
Ah,
okay, I want to work at that restaurant. Get me a job over there. And that's where it all started. We wound up washing dishes together over there for like a long time. I would say maybe 2 years, off and on,
yeah.
with school and everything, I'm working, 5 days a week, but we worked on the weekends. It was a good time.
Mm, okay. All
So yeah,
right.
I definitely wanted to work. I want when you see
Yeah.
your friends and you reach in your pocket and you have like maybe the change that your dad gave you from a 20 like 2 weeks ago, and they got like $80. You're like, okay, I want that. What does that look like? So that's how that all started. Again,
Yeah.
chasing the money. See that? We're going
Yeah.
deep on this guy. I'm learning about myself. Damn, I need more water to lay down.
Oh, but this is awesome though, because like I really love how your parents exposed you to such a wide range
Mm,
because, you know, I think at least for me with growing up, you get so like specialized in like one thing or
yeah.
and then when you later on when you have that aha, I want to expand in different areas, then that's when you're like, "Oh, wait, I need to learn more about this. Oh, wait, I need to learn more about that."
Mm,
And it's actually quite interesting because you were kind of like subconsciously still kind of carrying that out when you're working for the
totally.
advertising industry. You learned a lot there,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
I think it was like never, I think some people get stuck in that analysis paralysis. Like, how should I do it? I don't want to, but I was young. Like, I didn't have anything to really lose, like when I graduated college, if it didn't work out, I wasn't barely making any money at the corporate job I had anyway. And frankly, I think when I left to go to culinary school, I was making more money. I like working at the time, it was like maybe $9, $10 an hour. So I just never really thought about it in terms of, it was definitely, maybe I say chasing the money, but I definitely was more like, I don't know how I can pass the time by in these cubic. Like, I felt like I was working all day and I would look up and it'd be like an hour had gone by and I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. So yeah, it's interesting. Now I'm thinking about interesting to kind of leap without a net multiple times.
Yeah, but it's so good though. Like it's so good not to get stuck, because
Mm,
we evolve. We're all supposed to evolve. Everything in nature evolves
hmm
one form
Yeah,
or another. And
constant change. Yeah,
it's good. It's really good. It's good to explore, especially if you recognize you have the opportunity to.
yeah. I mean, I don't even know. I'm trying to think now. It's like, was it really opportunistic, or I was just trying? I mean, even with like not to get too far ahead, but owning my own restaurants was like I just jumped into partners with these guys. I didn't know these guys.
Oh,
Like I
really?
basically met them on the street. And now, I mean, I didn't meet them on the street, but it might as well have. And then I'm like, yeah, let's be partners. Where do I sign? So yeah, I don't know where that came from. That's
That's
a good question. I should
interesting.
ask if I had a psychiatrist. I'd ask them, why do I keep just jumping into these freaking things with people I don't know?
Yeah, I mean, let's
Yeah.
get into that a little bit, right? So you go to culinary school. And
Mm,
so how long was the time between when you finished culinary school and then opened up your first restaurant?
not long, because I didn't want to go to. I had gone to 4 year college. I went to a good liberal arts school, and I was like, I'm not going to CIA or anything. So French Culinary Institute, downtown Manhattan, Broadway and Canal was awesome, and I would go back there today. Like I would go spend the weekend. They had the opportunity to do like a weekend camp. I would go right now. It was amazing. But I also was older, right? Like I was 24, so I was like, I'm not waiting to. I'm not going to go work some line cook job for the next 3 years and hopefully become a chef. I don't care if I'm ever an executive chef of some restaurant. I want to get my own place and own it. And I guess it was probably 4 years after I graduated culinary school, I opened up like a little catering business that really kind of like set in motion the ultimate path to owning a restaurant.
Okay. Okay. So how was what was that like starting up your catering business?
It was like a deli and a catering business in the ground floor of a high rise in Jersey City. And it was actually Jersey City, Union City border, beautiful views of Manhattan. Like you could see everything on the west side. And it was the guy in the building owned it for a while, and he was selling it. And I was like, man, this is 500 apartments above it. I can do some catering out of here. And we instantly kind of painted the place, gave it a little spruce up, brought in some like good quality food, and it was great. But I was a lesson in like that was a lesson in you can't force people to have just because something is you think it's good and it could be very good. Like you make a great curry chicken salad, they don't want curry chicken salad. They want the plain chicken salad. They want so it was a lesson in give people what they want and charge them for it. That's it. Like you got to lose that chef ego of like, well, I made this. It's so great. The curry, we picked it up, in Queens at this special place and we made it ourselves or whatever it is. And it's like our own recipe, our grandmother. Nobody care. They care a little bit, but they don't care to the point in that location. Or, as I sort of learned about the customer base, I was executing over their heads and it was not their fault. It was mine, like, so if they said, I just want plain tuna. I don't want the Italian tuna. Okay. Plain tuna, it was like, so it got boring quick. So that's when we branched out, started doing more of the catering type stuff, which was great. But yeah, it was really something that kind of basically fell in my lap, and we had a great run there.
You like, there was like two really hot gems that I heard from that story. One, one was when you started identifying the location of the deli and how had all the high rises, so that you're gonna have a stream of customers, and it kind of
Yeah.
feeds into what you're doing now.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. No. And I'll tell you what, like that's when in a lot of my content I try to talk about that is all these things I talk about now. They really are a lifetime so far of what I went through it, making the wrong decision or jumping when there was no net and being like, I shouldn't have done that. Or, I should really pay attention to this. Or even after the fact, looking back now and saying, know who your customers are. Like I could have made money at that place just buying the pre-made deli salads from the guy, dumping them in the trays, selling them out to people. But I was adamant about making the soups, making the salads, making everything, busting my ass to do it. And then they're just like, it's a little expensive. Or it's not really my taste. I'm like, all right, fine. And eventually we started just toning it down. But I probably forced it for a while. And that's a lesson in wrong market. They weren't the market for what I was trying to do. And then when I found that market, and that's when things really took off.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other point that I recently had like a aha about is in business, it's not about you. Everyone, they're like, start a business that you're passionate about and making it about you.
Right.
No. It is not about you. It is
No.
what your customers want.
Yeah, and that's the thing is if and here it's like cliche at this point, but if you actually start your day thinking like, all right, how can I help these people? How can I help them out? And that is to me, we made such a horrible real estate decision with our first restaurant location that I have probably lost as many deals as I've done simply because I'll look at a space and be like, how are you guys gonna get the garbage out of here? The garbage has got to go out the front door. I don't know if that's a good look for your restaurant. Or wow, you don't have a space here for you guys do 80% third party delivery. Where are these guys going to park in this location? You're going to have an Uber driver pull up here, get a ticket because he can't park. And then he's like, I'm not going to come back. Going to tell all his Uber buddies, like, hey, it's tough to park over there. They're going to get an order saying, no, thank you, no, thank you. No. It's going to affect your business. And a lot of folks in my position wouldn't do that. They would let that be something that kind of develops that they figure out. Right. But when it happens to you, right, when you're the livelihood of your family, or if you're going to be able to pay your bills or go on the vacation you want to go on, you start to think about things differently for people because you don't want that feeling. If you actually are a decent human being, you don't want that feeling for somebody else, right? So that's kind of like for me where I come from with everything. People say, oh, I saw a great site. Why didn't you send this to me? I'm like, I'll tell you why I didn't send it to you, and I'll outline the reason. They're like, oh, that makes sense. But in my business now, a lot of times guys will say, oh, here's 15 sites that fit your criteria, but they don't fit the concept. So now we're wasting everybody's time. But in a weird way, it kind of makes things easier. I know I went off on a tangent there, but that's kind of like, but it is ultimately serving that purpose is what, gets the word out, right? You're actually there to serve them. And that's actually what the job is. And so if you I can identify it early on, and that's ultimately better for you.
Yeah, yeah. But honestly, that's part of the reason why I started my consulting firm, was because I was seeing how a lot of people just like to do stuff to just cut a deal, cut a check without
Mm,
necessarily operating from a place of integrity.
yeah. No,
And
yeah,
it
for
sounds
sure.
like that's what you're doing. You really want the best for your clients. You're not, doing things just because you want to hurry up and cut a deal.
Yeah, because when you've been in that situation and you signed a lease for 10, you signed a lease for a 10-year, commitment to that property, you're now in a relationship with that property and that community for 10 years. And if you're a startup restaurant, or even if you have some experience, you probably signed a personal guarantee, meaning if things start to go sideways, you're still responsible for paying that lease. So it's a big decision. And if you gotta have hard conversations sometimes, because people are like, no, I want that place. The rent is cheaper. I know it's going to be good, blah, blah, blah. You have to give them what they want, but you can only advise. And that's the hard part. But ultimately, yeah, it's a decision that you're going to want to take your time with. Patience, hefty dose of patience. If you can't help it, it could wind up biting the ass soon. So
Yeah.
I'd hate to have anybody in that position.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I had a question that was right on the top of my head, and it slipped, but it was related to your reputation.
Hmm.
You should be, or, I'm assuming, because you do things with integrity and because you really do have your client's best interests at heart, you're probably one of the guys where people are talking about, like, yeah, no, Kyle, he's a real one. And
I hope so.
do they? You
I
say,
mean, I think, but that's your point earlier. That comes with being in that niche. Like I'm just swimming in the same pool, so I'm running into the same people. And
mm-hmm.
my goal is, and I think anybody's goal who's creating a very specialized business is, whenever somebody has that problem, right, you're top of mind. Like who's that guy who talks about restaurants all the time on TikTok, or even for restaurants, I tell them all the time they get stuck in, haven't posted in a couple days. We're like, look, man, top of mind. When they're hungry, they make a reservation because they remember your video for whatever. It was funny, the food looked good, the bartender was cute, whatever the reason was, you were top of mind. So yeah, I think the same thing is reputationally is, I'm not going to go out and do a multifamily deal. I'm not going to do a industrial deal, but we'll talk about restaurants. And for sure, now at this point in my career, it's mostly referral business because of that reason.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's wonderful. It's like
Mhm.
your mistakes helped you to, I guess, be a better person, right?
Yeah.
You don't want people to repeat your mistakes.
No, God, no. Fuck you do. Because the end with restaurants, the barrier to entry is very low, right? So it's super low barrier to entry, but the risks are high because landlords are taking a shot on you. And if you don't know
Mm.
what you're doing, that lease is going to have you backed into a corner if things start going sideways. And if you have a family, or you have, like, even if you're just yourself and you have car payments, you have rent, you have savings, everything else you're trying to plan for, but you're stressing writing that rent check every month because your sales aren't where they need to be, and you haven't executed your business plan, you didn't even have a business plan, that can lead people to a very dark place. And
Yeah.
it's scary. It could be a very scary thing for anyone in this industry. Drinking, drugs, substance abuse is common because I think those stresses are real.
Mm. Have you ever been in that dark place in your
Oh
career?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're literally looking like, well, I either pay their rent or mine. Like, am I going to pay the restaurant's rent, or am I going to pay mine? And it's literally weeks. I mean, we spoke about, my partner and I think we worked 375 days in a row before we paid ourselves. And you're chewing through savings, right? You get a couple things paid for by the restaurant, but your gas, you want to take your girlfriend out to dinner, where are you going to get that money from? How are you going to make that work? Credit cards and debt and all that stuff. It gets scary, but ultimately, the thing that picked me up was, somebody was like, "Hey, man, if you got yourself into it, you can get yourself out of it, right?" So just take a second and look at where you're screwing up here. And we got aligned with the right people, and you start to open up to those vulnerabilities. You start to open up to feeling like, hey, somebody's got to help me out here because this isn't working. And thank God we did. And yeah, it's bad. And if you don't have the mental fortitude to kind of keep going, yeah, it's not a good, not a good thing.
Yeah. So what were the top 3 things you did to help keep your mental strength going, because those are dark times.
Yeah,
Those are dark
you
times.
I think the first thing we had, because it was like my partner and I had different visions for the concept, and then we were kind of forced to get it aligned because we were successful, and we had some people say like, look, basically stick with what works, stop trying all this new stuff. And as chefs, we're both, you know, accomplished chefs in our own right before we started here, but we were doing pizza and pasta, elevated pizza and pasta, but we wanted to show off, ego, and that's why I say that the killer to a lot of restaurants, people is your ego gets in the way. Somebody wants a pizza, make a pizza. They don't want your salmon special. They came here for pizza. So, I think the first thing we did was stay focused on who we were as a brand. We didn't sell, mass produced beer or soda. People would scream at us about why can't we just have a Heineken, or like, hey, can you get a Coca-Cola? We were just like, no, we're not going to do that. And, it turned into a bit of a fight, but you have to have those battles when you're in a partnership. But I think once we got on that path it was like, okay, we can figure this out. We can figure this out together. We're doing this for the customer. Kind of like I was saying with the deli and the catering business. They want us to do this. Let's just do that. And I think once we kind of realized who we were, you kind of held that above a lot of different things, and other things started to fall into place. I think like on the running the business side, the biggest thing for me was prioritizing stuff, because it's very easy when you're an owner to think that everything is, a major catastrophe. Everything needs your attention right away, when it doesn't, just because it's, hey, the delivery driver's outside, he's double parked. Like, that's his problem. He needs to figure that out. Or like, hey, I asked Susie to cover for me. She can't cover for me. Now I'm supposed to work tomorrow. I'm going to be late. Okay. You can't take on all these stresses. So once my partner and I figured out the spheres that he's going to travel in this one and I'm going to travel in this one, and then we'd overlap wherever we felt was necessary, and had these sort of who was dealing with what, it became very clear what my roles and responsibilities were. Right. So then once you're focused on that, you have to kind of just mute everything else out. Like, just because the beer guy happens to be in the neighborhood and wants to sample you on some new product doesn't mean you have to stop everything you're doing to satisfy him.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing. Like, hey, would love to try your beer. Unfortunately, right now is not the best time, but if you want to pick sometime next week, let's do that. And then they start to know it, and you just start to fall in this cadence. But when you're fighting every day for your own paycheck, it's you want to make sure you're on top of everything, and that could be a real stressor.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, that's good.
I know. See, this is why I don't watch The Bear. It's too real. It's too much actual real stress. So
Yeah.
but yeah, it's at the end of the day, when I was feeling like really like how's it ever gonna work? Like, this is, feel like I'm spinning. You have to kind of look at, okay, what else can I do? Right? Like, you can either make more money or you can spend less. Those are your highs. So we hired an accountant into the restaurant. How can we really, we were making money, but can we be better? And then look at your personal stuff. Like, do I really need to buy that? Do I need to have this car? Do I need to buy these types of clothes? Because if you're working for yourself, those are the sacrifices that you have to make. And, ultimately people decide if that's the path they want to go down or not. And some people stick with it longer than they should. But thankfully I caught it at a time where I was like, okay, I'm not going to continue like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it is scary. It's definitely scary. But it's also good that, you got to a point where you raised your hand.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you have to. Because running a restaurant is a very lonely business. You're not, I mean, if you work for yourself in any capacity, really, you can't go down the hall and say, hey, Jessica, can we take a look at this? I've never run this before. Can you help me out with this? And yeah, sure. I've in the restaurant business. I mean, it's a little bit different now with social media and podcasts and things like that. But 2010 to
Oh yeah.
2015, and it was like, hey,
Mm-mm.
figure it out, pal. Yeah, I
Mm.
figured it out. You got to figure it out. So, and some people just don't want to ask, right? They don't want to be like, look like my restaurant's struggling, because again,
Yeah.
I think it goes back to ego.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that was also really like another learning lesson for me too, because in corporate, when you kind of raise your hand too much, or
Hmm.
there's like a certain amount you can raise your hand for.
Yep.
After that certain amount, people look at you like, oh, maybe she doesn't know how to do her job.
Hmm.
Like there's serious implications if you raise your
Yeah.
hand too much. But one thing
Yeah.
I noticed with transitioning over and, growing a business, there's so many people out there who genuinely want you to win and genuinely want you to succeed. And,
Hmm.
just depending on which networking group, mastermind, whatever,
Yep.
there are people out there you can be like, hey, I'm struggling with this. And they'll be like, yeah, let's work through it.
Yep.
I've never experienced that ever before.
No, and you're right. I mean, corporate, it's that game, right? Like you wanna seem like you're doing everything right, but then if somebody looks at you like, hey, you, I thought you had this. You never asked us any questions. But then if you ask too many questions, you're seen as weak or incompetent.
Hmm.
To me, the moving around that I've done, it's obvious then maybe you're not at the right spot, right? Or you're not talking to the right person because, I know on the commercial real estate side, I worked at a huge, the largest CBRE commercial real estate firm.
Hmm.
And for sure, it was, yeah, if you have any questions, just ask. If you have any questions, just ask. But in an industry like that where everybody's commission based, every second counts, right? Every minute counts. So if you're not giving value or getting value, you're not going to get a lot of time from somebody, and you're not going to give up time yourself. But when you're new and you're eager for that information, there are brokerages where they will give you that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, come here. Why don't you tag along with us today? We're going to go check it out. I want you to meet this developer. I want you to hear how this phone call goes. And when I found that, then yeah, for sure things change. But it's definitely like you're saying, it's implied that one way or the other is not good. Too much of one side or the other is not. You're not looked at favorably. It's unfortunate.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about back to your story about how you even got into business with your business partners and
Mm.
they were complete strangers. I want to hear more about that story.
How much time do you have? I was my partner I met working on a consulting gig, and we just hit it off. But again, we were consulting. We were not. I was actually. Um, you're gonna laugh at this now. I was living in the U.S. Virgin Islands at the time, and I came
Oh.
back to Long Island because, the summer down there. I was working for a hospitality group down there. The summer down there is quiet because it's hot in the states. No one's traveling. So I would come home and I would still be getting paid from my job down there, which was awesome. So it was like a paid vacation. But if I worked a little bit, I'm like double dipping. So I had found this consulting gig, and long story short, I met this guy who was working there as well, and he wound up leaving. And on his way out the door, said to me, he's like, you should open up a restaurant. Now, if you worked in a kitchen with any like set of chefs for a period of time, always let's the biggest throwaway line next to like, all right, I'll see you tomorrow. It's like almost you don't even really put too much weight to it, but it started to pick up steam, and that was it. That was I knew him from working with him, having a few drinks, going out to dinner, having a good time. Um, but he offered me a very solid offer, like come back, you have an investor, they're going to give you some equity, and at that point, I had left the catering business, and I was like, well, this is good. Like I can get back in some equity, get back in owning something, sweat equity, no cat, no cash. So I jumped at it, but there was not we didn't sit down and have a conversation and what it looked like to be partners, share our financial situation, understand what each other wanted from this, right? Which is a big thing. We just did it, which, as we've learned on this show, is kind of how I do everything. And the fact is, it could have bit me in the ass real bad, and it didn't. But it certainly wasn't a pleasant experience towards the end.
Oh, it wasn't.
No, 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 no. It was, I
Oh.
mean, partners are for dancing. That's what I'll say would be my lesson from that. It was somebody told me when I kind of was going through it, because if you don't get along, like let's say it's like going into an awful relationship. You don't want to see that person every day. Then you're like, I gotta see this guy every day, and we just weren't talking to each other. And he had one idea, and I had another idea, and we had a third partner who he was really just a silent investor, but had too much. He didn't want to. He didn't want to get involved with our drama, so we wound up stuck in these really awful, stagnant situations. And thank God, somewhere in that all craziness, we were successful. So also, when you're very busy and making money, um, you're in the New York Times, you're in Food and Wine magazine, you're on local TV doing cooking demos. You feel good, and everything, you can kind of put everything else away because again, ego is getting fed in so many different ways. People love the food. They're asking you to partake in a certain, fair or festival. And, we had somebody say to us, you guys should really draw up a partnership agreement.
Huh.
And we did it when everything was rosy. We're making a couple bucks. We were looking at another location, and the thing was basically, partnership agreements are very important, but, you know, they could also have things in there that will hang you if you do the wrong thing. So ours was bulletproof. Like, we could have committed a major crime. As long as we promised not to do it again, you still kept your equity. You could be stealing from the restaurant, you could be, doing anything, and you would still keep your equity. So thankfully, when we all got heated, I was able to leave with a check, which not a lot of guys can do in that situation. So, because thanks to the partnership agreement. So if anybody listening to the show is in any business with a partner, stop right now. If you do not have a partnership agreement, put it on the calendar to start talking about on Monday, because it's going to go sideways at some point, and it's just a way to cover yourself. So that would be my takeaway from that, is get it in order, because if you don't, it's he said, she said, and everybody loses, and it's not something you want to experience.
Yeah. So how long were you guys in partnership with each other for a total? Like how many years?
8 years,
8.
years. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Long time. I mean, they're still open. The restaurant they're still open. Um, it's, they basically were two friends, and the one friend who was a silent partner had to side with my other partner, and I sold my interest to them. But it was $30,000 in legal fees for me, even to fight a partnership agreement that was in place, because they wanted to, when they had the leverage of, we're just going to not respond. My lawyer keeps calling. Well, that's $250 every time he's got to send an email and make a
Oh,
call.
wow.
So
Mhm.
yeah, it's messy, and I think um, it's just one of those ugly things. You got to sit down with your partner and talk about things that you don't want to talk about, and it's
Mhm.
you got leases, you've got money, you've got I always think about the restaurant. You've got not only your partners and your partner's family, but you have people who work for you, and they have family, they have kids, they go to school, they want to go to ballet classes, they want to go to Disney. So it's a tremendous burden, and you got to make sure that you can carry that on. Otherwise, you just kind of owe it to everybody to either step aside or figure something else out. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, how many years in did you start seeing the signs that this is going to go sideways?
man. You know what? It's like you see them, but in that business, chefs are all characters,
Mm.
and it's endearing to a certain extent, right? And it's like, yeah, we're having fun, whatever. But I remember one day, um, it was pretty early on. I would say the first year or so.
Oh, wow.
We were like, oh, something got shorted from the delivery. And he was kind of like, man, I got to get up early tomorrow and go to Restaurant Depot, which is like where you go. Some people shop there all the time, but for restaurants, most of the time, it's like the place you go where if your carrier or your vendor didn't have something, like, oh, okay, it's all right, I'll run over to Restaurant Depot and get it.
Hmm.
And he was, I was like, well, but I'm going out tonight. It's so and so's party and etc. And I knew his vibe. And he's like, but I'll pick you up at 10 or whatever it was. Never showed up. And I was like, didn't see him the next day. He's like, oh, sorry, late night. And then this happened, that happened. I'm like, yeah, but you could have called and said, hey, man, I'm not going. And he's like, yeah, well, I basically, sorry, I forgot. And he was very, I just, you get that feeling. You're like, And situations like that started happening more and more frequently, not just with me, but I would see it with staff or customers or even a vendor or whatever. And he's like, that's eventually going to happen to me again, and it could be, and then it did. And that was sort of the thing. So I saw it, but I ignored it for a while. Like I said, we're winning, so everything's good. But then when we stopped winning, 2008, 2009, when the housing market and everything got kind of sketchy,
Yeah.
people stopped coming in as much. It's one of those things where like you should have caught it, but you get scared, right? You're like, if I leave this, then where am I going to go? What am I going to do? So you deal with it as best you can. So that's why I say now, partners are for dancing.
Yeah. And there's something interesting about that 7-year mark too. I feel like, I know people talk about like in marriage or something like that, but it's like something around like the 5 to 7 year mark kind of shows you where a particular relationship is going to go.
Yeah, I've never heard that, but it sounds accurate.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, like one of my old coworkers, she told me about like the 7 year mark in your marriage. Like it's like a thing. There's like a whole thing behind it. I don't have
Right.
all the details, but
I'm gonna
there's like
Google
a
it.
thing.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna Google it now.
yeah, yeah. And like the other reason why I say that too is because I didn't necessarily get into like a business partnership with someone, but it's starting a friendship and you notice certain things and then you ignore it and then it always bubbles up over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that thing. I think it's you're just afraid to you tend to like over exaggerate the good times, right? The good times
Yeah.
aren't always as good, and the bad times aren't always as bad. It's somewhere in
Mhm.
the middle, and I think the quicker you can start to analyze that, I mean that comes with age, right? You can't just inject somebody with that at 15 and be like, yeah, you'll figure it out now. It's all good, but you kind of have to experience it. I see that now with my teenage daughter. She's looking at
Mm.
colleges, and I'm like, looking at her grades, looking at all these different things. I'm like, you're not gonna want to do this. You're gonna
Mm.
think this is gonna be so great, but it's not gonna be so great if this and this happen. And but again, that's probably another podcast too. Adolescence and making bad decisions.
Yeah, that is a whole. We could
Yeah, that's a
really
whole
get
episode.
into
So that's a
that.
different podcast for somebody else to tackle, not me for sure.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, because that time in your life, like it's really important.
Oh yeah, it's the I know face. I know. Yeah. Well, so
Oh, oh,
nobody knows.
oh. So where you are today, are
Mm-hmm.
you happy and excited? Are you doing what you want to be doing right now?
Yeah, I'm ecstatic right now. I mean, I just got a new job now, working on the client side, which is what I've always wanted to do. And we got a baby. We're moving into a new house soon, so we got a lot going on now. And yeah, very happy with where I am. And again, those things. I'm 47, and those kind of experiences, over time lead to something eventually. And I think that for me, it was up and down, different career stuff. But looking back, like my wife and I were just saying last night, I brought up this certain aspect of my job, and she was like, "Oh my God, you would never have experienced that if you didn't work where I am, where I just left." So it happens all the time, and people say it all the time, but it really does, and then eventually it will lead you to the right place. So, but yeah, I'm very happy with where I'm at, and we're looking forward to this new sort of chapter. So yeah, I'm excited.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so do you still want to like get back into owning a restaurant again or like how's your sentiment around that?
Oh man, never say never, right? That's the thing. I always have this like soft spot for like a coffee shop, not like
Oh,
a full on restaurant. But I don't know, man.
yeah.
And it's funny. Like I talk to other people who own restaurants. It's like a thing. Like that's what you want to do. Like in retirement, you still want to be able to like dip your toes into something. But I can't say that in my mind. Even if I tried to take my mind there, no way. I couldn't. I just don't have it. I don't have it in me anymore to like give as much as it takes to do that.
Mm,
But I'd rather be much more like um, advising. I don't want to be in like that kind of consulting, but when I provide real estate services, just because of my podcast and my experience, I get all those questions. What tech should I use? Have you ever, hired? What is it like to hire a district or director of operations? And all these kind of things come with it. So I enjoy that aspect of it, particularly now in my new role. So, um, yeah, I think it's one of those things where you're ultimately happiest doing with what you feel the most confident in. And I can feel confident, like I could jump on this podcast with you and talk about restaurants. I don't need to study or do anything. That experience is it's in me, and I'm just what I really truly love to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really important point to highlight, because I feel like nowadays everyone's like, own something, own a business,
Yeah.
or else you're not successful, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it comes down to where you are in your life. What's more important to you? You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned your baby in this new chapter in your life, and we talked about the ups and downs and craziness that really goes into running a restaurant, and that doesn't fit your life.
Yeah. No,
So
to me, it's a young person's game on the day-to-day operation side. I could see getting involved like in sort of like a board of directors type position on a larger restaurant stuff, but um, the day in day out of that is the time as you get older. To me, time is way more valuable.
yeah.
So I get to stay in because I work remote, so I can stay. My wife works super early. She works a fitness instructor. She has to get up a couple days a week, and I get to stay with him. If I had to rush out the door to go open the restaurant or do something like that, or I couldn't have lunch at home with him this first year of his life, maybe even a little longer, you can't. There's nothing. I don't care how successful the restaurant is. I guarantee you, anybody who made that sacrifice would go back and not do it, because it goes so fast, so fast. So, to me, that time with family, my wife, my daughter, my son, we get to spend as much time together as possible. Probably more than most do, just because of the way our jobs are. I
Hmm.
can't imagine if I had to be at the restaurant 14 hours a day, being not as my
Yeah.
wife would kill me on top of that.
Yeah, and you can't even talk about the downstream implications of working 14-hour days, how it impacts family life. Mhm.
I don't see how it would even work. I don't know how anybody does it, to be honest, with babies at home.
Well, I mean, if you get onto the mom side of Instagram, you'll see.
I'll tell you what, like I just now today, the mom, yeah, the mom's here. We can talk about this mom podcast. That they were home. I'm kind of low key today, summer Friday, and they were dealing with the baby. And he was being fussy. I'm like, I gotta go out to the grocery store. I'll take him with me. And I knew I had to be back here. And what we wanted wasn't at the first grocery store, so I had to go to and take him out of the car seat, and I just normally would carry him in, get what we want, going. I'm not shopping for the week, right? I'm getting one thing and I'm getting out. They didn't have it, and I was like, oh crap. So I'm like, man, shout out to the moms out there who make multiple stops with sometimes multiple kids. Oh my god, I don't know how they do it. There's so much respect. I was like, he's screaming, he's he's I don't know what now, and I'm like, all right, we just got to get home. And that was probably 25 minutes.
Wow.
So,
That's not
so
like a
yeah,
whole
I'm
hour.
exaggerating. These women do it all day, every day. I don't know how they do it. It's respect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Awesome. So, Kyle, if you could give,
Mm,
based on your life journey and everything you've learned, if you could give your top three pieces of advice for someone who's looking to have, the most ideal situation for their life, what what
mm,
what would it be?
man, three things you said. Okay, I would say probably number three would be patience. Patience. It's not going to happen right away. Spend the time to do what you think you need to do. Like, don't be in a rush to close a client or open that restaurant. Like, make sure you have everything so buttoned up. And if you don't know, ask, but be patient with yourself. Like, don't expect yourself to be further along because you see somebody your age doing something similar. Um, we know social media people post their highlight reels. So, like, just be be patient with yourself in that process. Give yourself that time to really go through the process of whatever it is to get up and running, to hire that person, or whatever it is with yourself or your business. Put a little bit of patience, a little bit of pause in there to what you do before you really execute. I've found that, you know, as we've said, I've jumped out a lot of different things, but as I've gotten older, if you just kind of, somebody presents something to you and you just kind of say, you know what, let me just get back to you on that. It's not a bad thing. I used to think that was a bad thing. You're not giving them the respect of an answer, but the reality is you're actually being more disrespectful by giving them a disingenuous answer, right? So I would say add some patience, a little bit of pause to some things. Two would be, um, I would say make sure that this is something you want to do for a long time, and if it's not, there's like some phrase that I'll probably butcher, but like, don't spend 5 minutes on it if it doesn't matter 5 years from now, or something. Like, don't spend your time stressing over things. So I think, if you're really trying to build something, I think you have to make sure that you're using your time wisely, um, on that stuff, because yeah, you could go faster. Move fast and break stuff kind of is a way to go too. But I think, make sure what you're getting involved with is something that you're going to at least do for long term, because life is precious, time is precious, it's very valuable. Understanding that piece, that where you focus your time, matters, and how you use it matters, and it's fleeting, right? It goes quick. So make sure what you're investing in, because you're gonna have to make sacrifices away from your family, friends, from trips, from holidays, relationships, pets, whatever it is. Um, just, you want to make sure you're giving yourself that patience and a little bit of understanding that, hey, I'm putting this time in, but this is something I really believe in, and that this is what I'm going to do. So having that will kind of, I think, fuel you to kind of keep you going. And number one, without getting into, like, because I'm a big believer in social media and getting your word out there and being top of mind and stuff, but just more on like the personal level, um, kind of go with your gut more so than you think. Your gut, I don't think, ever really lies to you. If I looking back at, even now, sometimes, you get that feeling like, I should unplug that because something might go wrong, and then you don't do it. Like, your gut was probably right. Something was probably wrong there. So now I start to do those little things, um, because sometimes you don't do it because you're afraid of how somebody's going to look at you, like you were saying before, about if you have a question, how you're perceived. The reality is nobody cares as much as you think they do. No one's paying that much attention. It's all in your head. So I think that understanding that you're there to do what you think is right, and innately you have that in you. You've probably experienced enough to right from wrong, or which decision makes more sense for you. But I think if you go with your gut, it may not be right 100% of the time, but I think you'll find it's right a lot of the time.
Yeah. It's more right. It's more right listening to your gut than it is wrong.
For sure.
Yeah,
For
for
sure.
sure.
And sometimes you want to fight it, right? Like, you're like, no, don't feel like I should do it, but and you look at that person, they're like, come on, and you're like, okay, all right, but like, damn, I shouldn't have done that.
Every time.
Yeah.
Every time where I'm like, I probably shouldn't do it. I do
Yes.
it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Never works out.
no, never, never, never. But yeah, that would probably be it. But that's a great question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And the favorite question, last but not least, whatever. How can people find you, Kyle?
I'm at Kyle Inserra on every platform. Email is Kyle at four-turns.com, FOUR. And probably the best way is just DM me on Instagram or LinkedIn. I love to talk to people about their restaurants. If I have the time, I'd love to talk to people about if they have that question. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk to more of you guys about that stuff. My ultimate goal is to help restaurants succeed and like increase the success rate of restaurants in this country. And sometimes it's only that one piece of information. So if I can provide it, that'd be great.
That's true. Maybe you should come down here to Florida. Seriously, in Hollywood, Florida, there's a strip, and so many restaurants have tried to open up on like a
Oh yeah,
particular corner, and I've probably
doesn't
seen like
work.
5 different restaurants in the past 5 years like
Wow,
shut down. So
that's not good. Yeah, that's not good. Um, yeah, I mean, I love it, Dom. I love Florida, but you guys got enough New Yorkers down there as it is. You don't need any more,
yeah,
I don't
that's
think.
true. We do have a lot of New Yorkers down here, including me. All right. Thank you so much, Kyle. This was wonderful.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Jessica.